Hello and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Garth Neufeld, along with Eric Landrum, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the in stuff. This is episode number 127, where Eric had the opportunity to interview Aaron Richmond from Metropolitan State University, the current editor of the Teaching of Psychology Journal. But before we get to that, the Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by Hawks Learning. Are you looking for more affordable, quality materials for your intro psych students? Check out Hawks Learning's mastery-based courseware and texts. These materials introduce foundational psychology and research concepts that inspire students of all majors to think more critically about the world around them. Take advantage of software features designed with student learning in mind, like customizable lessons that allow you to add videos, Google Slides, forms, and more to illustrate concepts and deepen understanding. Explore these materials, available to students for as low as $43, alongside free chapter projects and example videos at www.hawkslearning.com/psych sessions. Again, that's www.hawkslearning.com/psych sessions. Hey listeners, did you know that Psych Sessions just passed 100,000 unique downloads? We want to thank you for your support. If you've not yet had the chance to rate Psych Sessions on Apple Podcasts, we invite you to leave a rating there, as it helps people find us and will help Psych Sessions get out to more teachers of psychology. Also, feel free to use Psych Sessions in your courses or with your grad students. We have programming related to writing, career, professional development, and more. And more to come soon. And if you have an idea for Psych Sessions, this is the time for growth. Please reach out to us. We're easy to find. Psych Sessions is sponsored by Macmillan Learning Psychology. At Macmillan Learning Psychology, they know content matters, but so does affordability. That's why they offer a range of student purchasing options, including Achieve, Read, and Practice, a conveniently priced format combining the ebook version of your assigned text with their acclaimed adaptive quizzing system, Learning Curve. Students and teachers alike love Learning Curve for its individualized quizzes, feedback linked to the ebook, and positive impact on class performance. And with Learning Curve's analytics, you can see the content areas where students need additional support. Macmillan Learning Psychology, because content matters, but only when it serves the needs of today's students and instructors. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions to see a preview of Achieve, Read, and Practice. Now, before you hear this interview with Aaron Richmond, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. First of all, we've never talked about rotary phones on the podcast, and I was pleased because I totally forgot about them. Yes, I am barely old enough to remember rotary telephones, one of which we had in my kitchen, and it had probably like a 30-foot cord to it. Anybody out there find that a recognizable memory? And so this was fun. I got to listen to this with my 9-year-old daughter. I don't make her listen to all the podcast episodes with me, but we were listening to this one, and I got to show her what a picture of a rotary phone was and explain it to her. She had no idea by the time I was done, so apparently I'm not a great teacher. So there's that. Anyway, this episode just starts off with a lot of fun, and it gets serious, and it is very interesting. You get a behind-the-scenes look at Aaron Richmond, at what it means to be an editor of TOP, at somebody who is extremely productive and how he manages that with a huge value and care for his family. And so they do talk a lot about that. Now, Aaron was on the Psych Sessions podcast early on. It was years ago, actually, and I had the opportunity to interview him, and that seems like yesterday to me, but time got really weird. Time gets weird anyway, but time got really weird with the pandemic, which they talk about just kind of the adjustment through this pandemic. And yeah, it's nice to hear. It's nice to hear people reflect on that. The difficulties, the challenges. I think it is sort of, it values, it aligns with so many of what our experiences were. Now, there's a lot of differences in this interview with Aaron, but in this conversation between Aaron and Eric, and I think part of that is just their relationship and friendship kind of reflects that. But one of the things that you don't get, and I got to break Aaron in one of these podcast interviews, is Aaron sounds very serious. On our first interview, on this interview, and there's nothing wrong with serious, and he definitely has that in him, but if you have ever met Aaron Richmond, you know that he is just one of the most lighthearted, easygoing, fun people. That actually comes up in this episode. The fact that when he had to adjust for this pandemic, that he's kind of optimistic when it comes to these things. He kind of figured that they'd be all right. And I think either Eric puts those words in his mouth or he claims them himself. But yeah, Aaron obviously has this seriousness about him, but he is one of the people that embodies all that is good in teaching of psychology. And I mean, like the society. So many times over the years, and I'm sure this is an in-group thing, but let's just roll with it anyway. But as I talk to even the guard that has been here for a while, one of the things that has separated STP for decades now from maybe other kind of organizations where research is shared and critiqued and published is that there is such a respect and a humility and an honor given to scholars in our field, and there's just a humanity about it. There is a kindness, and it really makes this a home for many people. And I think that, again, there's so many of you out there who embody this, but Aaron is one of those people. I don't know that I've ever heard I don't want to hold him to a standard that is too high, but I don't know that I've heard many criticisms about other people come out of his mouth before. And I think that's a great person. That's the kind of person you want leading the journal for teaching of psychology. Someone who is encouraging and who does their job well and lifts other people up. And so, Aaron, I just want to say I appreciate that about you. I know others do too. And if you know Aaron, you are saying, yep, that's true, as you are listening to this. But, I'll tell you all this stuff, all the problems you have in person next time I see you. We'll just do this publicly for you. All right. So Aaron talks about his family. Aaron is a family man. That is for certain. The pride he has when he talks about his daughters and their activities is impressive. And they discuss how Aaron and his wife were able to make sure that they were adjusting during the pandemic in a way that led to the success for their entire family and care for their entire family. But that also included getting more internet for them because Aaron's wife is also an educator, and they were all 5 online at the same time. Anyway, what you're going to hear is going to probably really resonate with many of you out there who have been parents during this time. Eric and Aaron talk about productivity. And it's really interesting because Aaron likes to be productive. I think the word workaholic is used, not by Aaron, I think, but this leads me to just think about, we do say that, for those who, feel that pressure to be productive all the time, that's great. And, for those who don't, that's great and probably even healthier for them, right? Each individual person. But I do see this thing, and I'd like to talk with somebody about it at some point. I do see this thing happen where the most productive people tend to be the most quote unquote successful. And so it is in some ways still about quantity. Now, obviously quality is a piece of it, but it is about quantity. Now, I teach at a 2-year institution, and research is not a part of my job. And so somebody out there who teaches at like an R1 or whatever can probably put me in my place if I'm wrong. But I wonder about people who try to strike that good life work balance. I don't know how else to say that, but where they're not feeling the pressure, where they're not feeling like an imposter, where they're just doing what they want to do, and they're satisfying their institution and and their job requirements, but are not doing more than that. Can they be successful? Can they get into these leadership roles nationally? I don't know. So I will leave you with that question. I guess I sort of made Aaron's introduction about my questions and my considerations, but we have given him an introduction before, so it just seems kind of selfish that Aaron would expect 2 introductions on Psych Sessions. Of course, I'm kidding. It is our pleasure to interview our good friend. Folks, this is Aaron Richmond with Eric Landrum.
Welcome to a very special episode of This Is Your Life. No, welcome to a very special episode of Psych Sessions. This is a post-pandemic edition where I am actually face-to-face in the flesh with, wait for it, Dr. Aaron Richmond from Metro State University-Denver. Hi, Aaron.
Hello, Eric. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for being here. What a fantastic treat.
It is. It's amazing. It's, as I said earlier, this is my first face-to-face meeting with a friend and colleague, and I can't believe it's with the known Dr. R. Eric Landrum, and I'm excited.
The known versus the unknown? The known versus the infected? I don't know what your options there were, but thanks for the choice that you made. I appreciate that. We were just chatting beforehand about nobody ever calls you. Let's go back to that. Is it that your cell phone is unlisted? Can you have an unlisted number like the olden days?
I was surprisingly very cell phone resistant for a long time.
I remember you had was it a flip phone for the longest time?
Yeah, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I got my first cell phone, and it was a flip phone. It was
or was it the BlackBerry?
No, I wasn't that fancy. I got a flip phone because I was starting to travel a lot, and I have young kids, and my wife insisted that I would get in touch. And I actually had a situation where I was at a conference and I was rooming with a friend and had an incident with my middle child, Phoebe, who we at the time didn't know had a medical condition, and she couldn't get a hold of me. And so at that point, I succumbed to the pressure, and rightly so, and finally got my first cell phone, I guess maybe 8 years ago.
And with the cell phone, did you actually pony up for the texting plan, or did you have to deposit quarters every month?
No,
the text messages.
The first version was definitely a flip phone, no texting, no just a, pay by the minutes track phone type deal.
Was it that you had to press, if you wanted to say call, you had to press the one button 3 times to get to the C?
It had a rotary dial on it, actually.
A rotary text phone. How fun would that be?
For your listeners who may not know what that means, but yes.
No, tell them about how you put your finger in the hole and you spun it. Go ahead.
It had such a satisfying tactile click, 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 click on the way back, too.
Do you actually remember rotary phones?
Absolutely, yeah.
Are you old enough to remember them?
I've seen them on television,
But you never used them.
No, I used it. I just give you a hard time. I definitely used a rotary phone.
Do you remember that there used to be a word that stood for the first 2 letters of your local phone number?
No.
So my phone number growing up was 223-8303, but it was really BA3 8303, which stood for Baldwin 3 8303.
I do remember, I grew up very rural in Northern California, and I do remember what a party line is. And so you could get on and you could actually hear other people having conversations and ask to use the phone. And I think there were people who were in the community who just that was their YouTube of the day.
That was their Friday night.
Yeah, that was their social media, their tweeting.
YouTube is fine. I think probably it's closer to Twitter or Instagram.
Sure.
Probably, well, no, Twitter and Instagram both are visual, so I don't know. Maybe,
yeah.
It's their texting of the day, perhaps.
Yeah,
there's no visual component.
Yeah, maybe Voxer.
All right, so you're Voxer.
Yes,
Nicely done. Yeah. Are you a Voxer person?
I am with Garth and a few other people.
Garth who?
Oh, that other guy that runs this wonderful podcast, Garth Newfield.
Possessions?
Yeah, at that tippy northwesty thing too.
Yeah,
he does a lot of great things.
He's all over the place. He's got a bundle of energy, that man. I'm telling you. So you mentioned coming out post-pandemic. Mm-hmm. So on a serious note, how are you?
Thank you for asking. I'm doing well. I think that like many students and faculty members, I think it's long in coming, but it's also kind of one of those transitional periods, just like if you were to go from elementary school to middle school, where there's a cultural shift that you have to get back to that is probably not going to be the same as what it was before, pre-pandemic and pre-quarantine. But we're doing well. We're trying to ease ourselves back into it. And this was one of our first big steps of actually getting on the road and going and doing something and seeing some family. I still have not seen either my parents in almost a year and a half. And so
where do they live?
My father lives in northern Idaho, and then my mother spends her time between Arizona and California.
Okay. So this is the first big family trip post-pandemic.
It is, yeah.
Have you traveled to any conferences or conventions or anything yet?
I've done virtual stuff, and that's it. No, nothing face-to-face. I mean, I look forward to it. I look forward to the annual conference on teaching that SDP sponsors here in October. I'll be going to that, hopefully, and some of the other regional conferences. But I have not. So...
And Aaron, only to the extent that you're comfortable with it, would you mind sharing with our listeners? Because I know a lot of them, not only did they have work changes in their responsibilities over the pandemic, but they also had at home childcare changes and responsibilities. And for the listeners who obviously there's no way you could know this, so we just enjoyed a very nice lunch together and chatted a great deal about this. You and your wife shared a lot of different childcare duty changes over the course of the pandemic. Can you talk about what you and your wife had or chose to do differently for your three girls, and then also maybe a little bit about how that changed your career and day-to-day job, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, as much as you're comfortable with.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, the changes initially were, with a household of 5, 2 educators and 3 kids and 2 in middle school and 1 in elementary school. I think the changes were how do we do this all together? How do we do this in this this house? And luckily I live on a little bit of a farm, and so my kids were able to get out and be outdoors, and that so many people across the globe didn't have the opportunity. And so I'm very thankful of that and of that knowledgeable privilege to do that. So I think initially it was okay, how do we do this together? How do 3 kids take classes online? And my wife is actually an elementary teacher. How does she teach online? And then how do I teach online? And so I think there was, physical space. There was, upgrading internet. And we had, it was just bandwidth, right? And so initially it was that. And I think once we got into the groove of things, I think for us, it was the uncertainty of what our kids were doing on a day-to-day basis or having to help them. I think I shared with you earlier, my youngest child, who was in the 4th grade, just needed more help, needed more assistance. My 2 middle schoolers were pretty self-regulated and didn't really have to worry about their schoolwork too much, unlike a lot of parents across the country and across the globe where, it was really difficult. And my younger one was just a little harder, and she just needed more assistance. And so... And my wife having to sit in front of a screen for 8 hours a day and watch 3rd graders and teach 3rd graders, that kind of fell on my shoulders a little bit, like a lot of our colleagues did. And so I found myself definitely working later at night and and just shifting my schedule. I think that was another adjustment that happened for many of us across the pandemic, was finding quiet places. And, maybe, it wasn't that we could go to a Panera and finish our editing or our grading. It was finding a quiet place to get something. And for me, that often occurred after people fell asleep.
So thank you for sharing that. There's a lot there to unpack. So first, you had to make the adjustment to, suddenly being together March of 2020, and even the most loving family who adores one another being thrown together that quickly, that unexpectedly would struggle, even in a home with a lot of room and great outdoors and animals to enjoy. That had to be a struggle. But then there's all new routines, and like you said, when you're talking about your three daughters, I kept thinking about, there's individual differences, in terms of learning, and there would have been, even if there hadn't been a pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There would have been individual difference reactions to any learning situation that had to be compounded. So what do you think about all that?
Well, as you said, they all have their individual differences. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses in terms of maybe academic or even social development. My middle child, who is going to be in 8th grade, and my oldest is going to be a freshman in high school, Phoebe, she asked me about a month ago, she said, "Can I stay online?" And my knee-jerk reaction was, HE double hockey sticks, no. But
that's what you said to her. That's how you said it to her, with the hockey sticks?
I'm pretty straightforward and honest with my children, and I may have said that.
Probably said F no.
But I kind of said, well, we can think about that, and I think every household is struggling with some questions that are very similar like that. And, and my eldest child, I think she probably needs a little bit more social engagement, not necessarily because she seeks it, but probably for the fact that she doesn't seek it, and she kind of needs to be forced into those situations a little bit. And so, it's something that we had a conversation about, and, we ultimately said, no, it's important that you go back and see some face-to-face. But I think that's just a little micro example of what people, whether they're staffing the psych office or whether they're affiliate instructors or whether they're, full professors. I think we're all, to a certain degree, kind of just trying to figure out what's that next step. What does it look like? What is the fall? And I think for many of us, our fall schedule looks very drastically different than our spring schedule. I'm going to be face-to-face. I think here at Boise State, where you're going to be face-to-face for the most part. Yeah. And so, and I have colleagues all across the country who had various experience of whether they were face-to-face or not. I myself and most people at Metro State, we were fully and remotely online. And so I haven't seen my colleagues in 14, 16 months, right. Not face-to-face anyways. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of tears in that first faculty meeting. I think there's going to be a lot of hugs with permission. And if anybody feels comfortable, I've noticed some on social media, some people wearing shirts that say it's okay to hug them. And, I think that's going to be interesting. And I think that, just going back to your initial question, I think it's really about what does it look like in the next 6 to 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, Aaron, how far are you into your career? How many years are you post-PhD?
I am 15 years post-PhD.
And have all of those been at Metro State post-PhD?
Yes, every single year.
So is there any way that you can kind of, I don't even need you to quantify, are you able to articulate, if you can, what effect do you think the pandemic had on your scholarship or your program of research? Did you have to pivot? Did you have to put it on hold? Did you do something different? Did you just pause it? What if anything, happened?
Well, something I haven't thought about much. I very rarely have time to think about ponder things like that. I think when it all hit, I was 4 months into my first year as the editor of TOP. And so I was pretty immersed in
Sorry, what's TOP?
Sorry, the Journal of Teaching of Psychology, STP's flagship journal. And so I was immersed in that process. I think in terms of my scholarship, I didn't have, we all have different phases of our scholarship at any given point, whether it's, okay, I need to collect more data, whether I need to generate ideas, whether I need to write and get something out. I definitely stopped collecting I didn't stop collecting data. I slowed down collecting data, but I did find a little bit more time to write. And that has always been my difficulty, is finding enough time at a heavy teaching institution load where I teach 4 classes a semester. It's always been difficult for me to find time to actually submit a manuscript. I can collect data. I can analyze data. That's quick and easy for me. But so I think in the pandemic, I think that it gave me a little bit more on top of the opportunity to get stuff pushed out. And I was fairly productive. I don't know if I was productive in the sense of new ideas and collecting new data, but
so how did you find the silver lining of finding time to write? Where do you think that came from? Can you identify that?
Well, some of the research that I did finish up was very relative to the pandemic. And so I did a project with Guy Boyson and Regan Gurung about online teaching and some other things. And so I think the incentive there was, this is a pressing need. We need to get this information out, and we need to get teachers of psychology resources and help to get them through this process. So some of it was an opportunistic situation. I think the other part was, I think that idle hands for me is a little bit difficult. And when you're sitting at home and you have no travel time, or, I'm not going to conferences, or I'm not going here and there, and I'm not even commuting, and I commute 2 hours a day when I go down to campus. And so I had all this other time, which sounds really weird, but I did have this time to focus on actually writing something up.
Well, that was going to be my question. So, the pandemic in some ways opened up time opportunities for you, but you just answered that question. You didn't commute those 2 or 3 days a week that you would go to campus, so you saved 4 to 6 hours a week. You not only were you not traveling to conferences, but you weren't prepping your keynote addresses for those conferences. You weren't working on those slides. You weren't practicing those talks. You weren't prepping those posters. You weren't working with the students who were going to present those posters at those talks.
Correct.
So that's where that time savings came in, and you had either the luxury or the intestinal fortitude to focus that into a scholarly productivity.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it was usually at 11 o'clock at night, after working with kids. But you're right. It was still a focus, and it was still something I was driven to do.
I'm telling you, my 11 o'clock at night is looking at Netflix or looking at my phone. It's not looking at a screen working on a manuscript. I'm just being completely honest. Good for you for having that focus that late at night after what had to have been a completely tiring and exhausting day as a parent and as an educator, as a parent educator, and all the roles that you and your wife were playing all day long.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say playing, portraying. I don't mean playing as in faking. I mean the roles that you were portraying in your family. I don't know. I mean, I'm at an institution that definitely values my scholarship, but I'm also at an institution that doesn't require that I do a massive amount. And so I think that I do most of my scholarship because I have questions that I want answered, and I have questions that I want to do, or it's not to garner another publication. I know you well enough that I know the institution is not motivating your level of productivity. I absolutely can guarantee that.
It's just more of an internal drive, I think.
Yeah, I kind of think so. I do. So you mentioned this thing that I made you spell out the acronym, because not everyone will know every acronym. This thing called TOP, the Teaching of Psychology. And so in 2020, if I have the timeline right, you began a new role. Would you just take a little bit and describe what your new role is, how that came about, And what's it like being the editor of STP's flagship journal, Teaching of Psychology?
Yeah, I think that in terms of my role, as the editor, it's such a privilege and it's such an honor to be kind of at the forefront of a journal that has really shaped the way our scholarship has investigated problems, who answered problems, who has exposed problems. And so for me, I think one of the things why I was interested in the position is that I got to see all of the manuscripts that came in. I got to see the ideas that maybe didn't make it to the table or to printing press, as to use a kind of antiquated analogy, but to also see what is on the forefront and, what's the special issues going to be? What are the things we need to concentrate and focus and redirect on? And so I think that that's kind of the motivating factor for me, and also just something that's really important to a society that I truly feel is kind of my academic home. And so having some say in that and having some direction and some ability to point direction, I think is super, super important. And that's with the help of tremendous associate editors of Nana Kiorko and Jennifer McCabe and Guy Boyson. And
so when you became editor, just for kind of a general education of the listenership, were you appointed to that? Were you elected to that? Did you apply for that? How did that work?
Yeah, it's an application process that I think was an open call to not just STP members, but throughout APA and different listservs across the globe, Europlat, all that. And so it's an application process, and there's a selection process that I believe the past president, and it was kind of a committee made up of officers from the Society of Teaching of Psych. And you interviewed for it, and there was a kind of a finalist, and then had another interview for it. And thankfully, and very pleased that I was selected to be the editor, the incoming editor.
And then it's a 6-year term, is that right?
Yeah, you can do a 6-year term with the opportunity of doing another 6-year, and then your term limited to 2 terms.
And the renewal, is that up to you, or is that up to the executive committee? No, I'm not teasing. I know. I don't know the answer.
No, it's up to the executive committee. I don't believe it goes back to a national call, but I could be wrong about that.
I'm guessing it probably wouldn't. Yeah. That seems
probably something I should check into. Maybe, I don't know.
But you're a year in, what, 6 months in? So you're 18 months in?
Yeah, there is a period that you're not the editor, where you shadow the previous editor.
You're editor-elect?
Yes.
Editor in waiting?
Right, which is actually quite intensive, just in the sense that it's such a complicated and such a large process that it's really important. And I truly thank Drew Christopher for his mentorship in that role, for sure, as the previous editor of TOP. And so there's kind of a year prior to that. So in a way, I'm actually 2.5 years into the process. And if I were to not be the editor in 6 years, I would again mentor the person who's coming in.
So it was a whole year transition.
Yeah.
Getting ready.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's actually currently, up until about 2 issues ago, most of the publications coming out of the journal were still under Drew's editorship. So
have you actually yet seen in paper, in print, anything that you accepted under your editorship?
Yes, I have. And it's
Was it kind of fun?
It was a little, I always have the imposter syndrome to a certain degree. And so it was a little weird to realize that,
hey, I'm the editor.
Well, yeah. And just to see it from, each iteration. And for those of you who are interested in submitting to any journal, it's not, you'll know, and if you have experience with this, it's not like, hey, I submit this and it's accepted. It's always a process. It takes multiple iterations of that manuscript to get to publication. And so to see that process and to interact with authors as well, I think that is just as rewarding as to see something that gets published in a journal. I think that, it's one of the reasons I got involved. It's definitely one of the reasons that I became more of a SOTL, scholarship, teaching, and learning focused researcher, was because of my interactions with editors like Drew Christopher or Birgit Spinneth or you and Regan at SOTLP.
In your publishing career, have you ever submitted a manuscript and had it accepted on the first submission?
No.
I haven't either.
No.
And
no.
I've been post-PhD for years. And I've never, but I've heard people say that accepted upon accepted upon first submission. I've heard people tell the story.
Yeah, who are those people?
I'd have to go back and think about it, but I've never had anything.
Yeah.
Not even close. Not even accepted with minor revisions.
Yeah. Oh, even I think invited papers. I mean, they're going to go through reviews.
A good invited paper will be reviewed by someone, and there will be edits.
Yes,
there will be things
absolutely.
to change and update, and mistakes in the references that have to be corrected.
Yeah,
someone's looking at it carefully.
Yeah, no, that's so far in my limited experience, that's never been the case, and in my experience as a researcher, it's never been the case either.
I probably shouldn't say this or record it, but I'm going to anyway. So Regan and I got to write a closing editorial, and it was themed after Carol Burnett. It's so nice to, what is it? It's so nice. We've had this time together kind of thing. And, it's kind of really not peer reviewed. It's an editorial. It does get reviewed and does get copy edited.
Sure.
And let me just say right here, right now, as we're recording this was my idea. This was not the idea of Regan A.R. Gurung. I just want to make this really clear right now. But I actually slipped in something into the manuscript that actually got published that is not at all related to the content of the manuscript.
Oh, no.
So listeners, if you enjoy an Easter egg hunt...
Where's Waldo and SOTLP?
There's a little something extra, a little something in the very last editorial that we wrote as we departed. It's not to me, it's not embarrassing. It's not toward, right. It's not inappropriate, but it's like, if you're really reading carefully, you're going to go, You're going to have that Tim the Tool man grunt moment. So.
I'm sure it's kind of like our students who might slip something into what we're reading that they're writing, that just to check to see if we're actually reading it.
I think I'm surprised students don't do that more often. They slip the sentence into the boring method section. Right. Dr. Landrum, are you really reading this? Just to see if they're going to get red penned around that.
Right.
So are you, and maybe this is a cheap question to ask, are you having any fun as the editor of Teaching of Psychology?
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
What kind of fun are you having as an editor?
I think that for me, it really is about people. I think obviously it's about science first. I think that publishing really, the best thing I can do is to publish innovative, and really what Drew always used to say is, what is the additive value of this manuscript or this article? And so, yes, that's the fun part, is really getting into, and to be honest, you and I earlier were talking about going around to departments and doing program review of their departments and, their curriculum and the whole department. I think the journal is very similar in the sense that you get to see what other people are doing and how they scientifically test what they're doing. And I think at the very least, I'm getting something out of that, even if it doesn't make it to print, and for whatever reason. And so I think that's very pleasurable. It's very fun, actually, because then I'm improving every day in my teaching, and something that we should always strive to do, whether it's a little baby step or it's a wholesale change. And so that's part of it. I think the other part of it is I just enjoy reading about what other people's process and ideas are. You can have people who design an experiment or an intervention that is just completely something that you wouldn't fathom, and you read it and you go, holy cow, this is amazing. Or even you might have something that maybe not be the most innovative study, but they have the recommendations that they have for future research or for future teaching applications is so eloquent or so precise and succinct that that is fun. I know it's totally nerdy. I know it's totally nerdy, but those two things are really something that I don't know why else you would do the journal, to be honest. Like, I mean, it's a lot of work. And so if you can't find things like that are rewarding. And I think the other thing is getting new people into, as they would say, the fold. You know, like, I think that small communities like Society Teaching a Psych and in other areas that are focused on teaching, they're small for a reason. And that reason is complex. Some of it is certain institutions aren't focused on teaching. That is, it could be that it's insular and that we don't get new people. And I think with the journal, what is nice is I see names that I don't know. And we don't always feel that way at ACT or something. We know most of the people because there's only 300 people at the annual conference in teaching, or RMPA, there might be 700 people, but the teaching folk are like 50, you know? Yeah. And so I think at the journal, you get to see scholars that are maybe, you know, hardcore social psychologists or experimental or educational psychologists who are doing discipline specific research, and then they do something that is related to teaching of psych, and they submit it to the journal, and you're like, wow, this is just who are you? This is amazing work.
Well, to the journal's credit, you have made a decisive effort to recruit people from diverse backgrounds and to enhance efforts in equity and inclusiveness, not only for special issues, but also for editorships and associate editors. And it's obvious throughout your relatively brief editorial term, but also in STP with their relatively recent statement on equity and inequality. So, I mean, kudos for you for taking, you know, it's one thing for an organization to make a statement, then it's another thing for all the foot soldiers within the organization doing the work, which is typically the vice presidents and on down in STP, for doing something about it. And it's really clear that you're taking that seriously and you're doing something.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that it's just a first step. I think it's one of those things that we can't get there quick enough to. And I think it's just going to, I think part of that focus or that new direction, I think a big part of that is getting people who are not within the norm of the normal names is what I'm kind of referring to. And I think that is extremely important. I think the journal allows me some leverage with that.
Well, and let's just have a really super honest moment here for a second. You know, I think people who organize conferences sometimes would rely on asking the same old people. They would rely on asking on an Eric Landrum to come give a keynote, or maybe sometimes an Aaron Richmond to give a keynote, because you know you've seen them a lot. You've seen their names in papers a lot. They've been to a handful of other conferences. You've seen them give a talk. They're pretty good at giving a talk, maybe from time to time. And so when that happens, you don't think about, you know, first gen faculty or BIPOC faculty or other minoritized faculty members or queer faculty. People get, myself absolutely included, we get it in a mindset where we don't think about groups other than ourselves, and we have to concertedly think differently if we're going to break those patterns.
Absolutely. And I think like I said earlier, I think we can't get there quick enough, but you know, Susan Nolan the president of STP, has gotten some great initiatives going on. And, you know, I think at all layers within the Society of Teaching of Psych and other societies, I think we are waking up a little bit, and our eyes are coming open, and rightfully so.
Yeah. So, Aaron, I've been sitting here listening to you talk very seriously. You know, I'm thinking back to your interview with Garth, a little bit different tone with him, but that's okay. I'm an old man with a white beard.
And that's why that's going on.
Is that, the shirt's staying on, buddy. There's not enough money in the world for you to buy that. Plus, I can't afford your therapy. So, tell me about where the work ethic came from in you. You are 15 years post PhD, and I'm sitting here thinking, how in the world has this man accomplished what he has accomplished, done what he's done, seen what he's seen in 15 years post PhD? So where does that work ethic come from?
You know, my dear friend Anna Ropp, who's a colleague of mine at Metro State, and she has mentioned this previously about this kind of Midwestern, work ethic and this idea of idle hands. And although I didn't grow up in the Midwest, I think that my background in rural California and kind of I've held every job you can kind of think of, whether it's washing dishes or I was a bouncer or I've been a cook or I've worked for clothing companies or I've worked on ranches and farms. And I think that those are all occupations that for the most part, they are not paying for you to sit idle. And, if you're leaning, you're cleaning kind of culture, right? And so I think as, I started working when I was 12, not legally. I think at the time, a 12-year-old is not supposed to work in California.
Working for money or just working for the family business?
No, I was working for, my dad was at the time as a district attorney and my mom worked for a prison, but I was doing lawns, I was doing lawn care and that kind of stuff. And so I started working then, and then, in high school, I worked during high school, but my summers I worked full time. And then as an undergrad, I worked 40 to 50 hours a week all throughout my undergrad.
So first job at 12. Mm-hmm. So why? Do you remember? Do you have, were you saving for something? Was there something you wanted to buy? Was there a motorcycle?
There's definitely things. I mean, I did actually at 12 maybe 13 buy my first motorcycle. I don't know if that was the reason why. I think it was something that culturally within my household in the area I grew up, that was just something that was expected. I think that was something that was a norm. That's something that maybe was a sign of character. I don't know. I don't try not to wrap myself up with it too much, but I think that I enjoyed working. This is, date myself. This is back pre-social media, pre-internet, really.
It's back in the rotary phone.
And so, to a certain degree with your summers and, I wouldn't say I was a latchkey kid, but I was kind of a latchkey kid. And so, there was a relative amount of boredom that you can do out on a farm. And so I think it just was something that I don't want to say expected. I don't know if my mother and father expected me to work at 12, but it was something just came up and you do.
Were they proud of you? Like, oh my God, Aaron got a job at 12. He's cutting lawns. Aaron's lawn care service.
I think
it was more cute poster you made.
I think it was more. Oh my God, Aaron's got something to occupy his time, and he doesn't destroy the home or destroy the farm. I think it was more.
The cat's still alive. Aaron's got a job.
I just was and still am very energetic, and I think it was just one of those things that is something to occupy my time.
Do you brothers and sisters?
I have an older sister and a half older brother. Yes,
a half brother.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and the sister, not that it really matters, half sister?
No, she's my older brother. I didn't really meet until I was in my early 20s.
Okay, so didn't really grow up with them. So really grew up with the older sister.
Yeah.
And what's the age gap?
Noelle is 4 years older than me.
She's 4 years. So you weren't in the same high school at the same time?
We were in the same elementary for a little bit, and that was it. We're very close now. We were close then too, but it was more of there's 4 years, and I was really small, and she was very mature for her age, and so it was definitely a big difference.
And ballpark it for me. When she was 12, did she get a job? Was she that industrious? No, but was she industrious as well? And
I remember
idle hands.
Yeah. She was a lifeguard. I remember her doing. She babysat a little bit. She gave swim lessons. We were both on swim teams, so that was kind of her forte at the time. And yeah, she was. So she at 12. I don't know.
Did she set the bar so that you had to come along? Little Aaron had to come along and keep up with Big Sis.
I think it was more our family. I don't know if it was my sister. I think that both my mother and father, worked very hard and played very hard too, but worked very hard. And I think that was just the culture of our family. I don't think it was, I of course look up to my sister and still do, but I don't think it was, well, she's got a job, I've got a job. I think it just was more of just a norm. It just was, okay, you got to produce a little bit.
You got to produce it.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think that going back to the pandemic conversation, yes, that was definitely something that played into it. But I also think that, and really going back to Ann and I's conversation, I think that that can have a detrimental effect for sure. This idea that you have to be doing something and that you have to be producing, I think that's very good, and it works for me. I think that if for you that it doesn't work, I think it can be a poor situation.
It works for you, and for you, and I don't want to oversimplify it.
Sure.
So you can correct me and have fun doing it. For you, the pandemic was no big deal. I got this. I was going to be busy anyway. You just kind of changed what I was busy doing.
Yeah, it was stressful. I think for me, the pandemic was stressful for more of schedules, and my personality is more of a kind of roll with the punches kind of personality. And so the pandemic, I wouldn't say it was easy at all. I think that it was hard for myself. I think it was hard for my wife. I think it was even hard for my kids.
How was it hard for you?
I think for me, that's great. Not seeing my students was a big part of it. I think that I tend to split my classes half online, half face-to-face, and that was a big part of it. Not seeing my colleagues, not seeing my friends. I think what was hard was more of the sense of how do we balance what everybody needs to do at the same time.
So emotionally, it was hard.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling, and again, correct me, workload. I was going to work this hard anyway. The pandemic might have changed my workload, what I'm doing during my workload. But again, the words might be wrong coming out of my mouth, but I'm essentially a workaholic, but I enjoy it. I've been doing it since I've been 12.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be idle. This pandemic's not going to slow me down. I'm going to do my stuff that I got to do.
Yeah. I mean, have you been texting my wife?
I haven't. Amanda and we use our phones and we leave the ringers on. We had dinner in Paris one night. Now,
yes, we did. I was with just everybody. I was there too. Just so
and my wife was there too. The four of us were there with other couples. Yeah.
I think some of that. Yes, I mean, I was going to do the work anyways. I think that just like we had talked previously, for those faculty members who had previous experience of working fully online or in hybrid, I think the pandemic was just a little bit different for them. I think for faculty and students who had never taken an online course or taught an online course, I think that there was an added pressure and learning curve that was stressful.
Yeah.
And I had less of that stress.
And you can change the topic if you want.
No.
But this is about Aaron. You're 15 years post PhD, and I'm sitting here, and maybe it's the first time I've actually stopped and really thought about it. You just knock it out of the park, and someone 15 years post PhD shouldn't be as accomplished as you are.
Well,
and they shouldn't have achieved. When did you give your first keynote address?
I don't know, 2010, 2011.
And do the math for me. How many years post PhD were you?
4 or 5, maybe 6.
You gave an invited keynote address 4 or 5 years post PhD.
Yes.
I've actually done the math for myself.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to know how many years I was post PhD before I gave my first invited keynote address?
Yeah, I would love to know.
19.
Yeah.
19 years post PhD. Bill Hill invited me to CTOP, and I was thrilled. And sometimes comparisons aren't really meaningful.
Sure.
Because people have different careers, different trajectories. What I'm telling you, in my opinion, which may not matter, except to me, is that your work ethic is off the charts, and it benefits anyone who you focus it on.
Yeah.
And your daughters and your wife certainly benefited during the pandemic, and you benefited from Amanda's work ethic and dedication to your family, and your department benefits, and they benefit from you and you benefit from them. But sometime, perhaps in the near future, take a moment, take a bow, take a breath, then get back to work, because that's what you're going to do anyway.
Well,
but there's a work ethic that came from somewhere, family DNA, perhaps, where at age 12 something triggered in you, and you haven't stopped yet.
Yeah, I mean, I love to play. This is all audio, so you can all see me blushing for the last 25 minutes. I do appreciate it. I think that I know in past podcasts that I've listened to from psych sessions, you talk about luck and there's no such thing, and I think
that's not exactly what I say, but okay, that's fine. You get to have your recollection of what I say.
Yeah, inferential reconstruction, right? So I think the big thing too, though, is that, and you're right, I think there's a correspondence or there's a correlation between that work and the people you meet, and I think that also, if we're doing comparisons, I think that you meet people like Pam Mansberg, you meet people like Eric Landrum, you meet people like Jane Helen, and you meet people like Regan Gurung or Garth or any of these people who are well connected and who
the people you left off are going to be really pissed.
I know that list can go. Well, we don't have enough time, so that list could
They're
be.
They're going to be so pissed off at you, the people you left off.
All right, people just throw me under the bus now. But you meet those people through that dedication and hard work, but it's all interconnected. And so I think that it's not a coincidence. It's not necessarily luck, but there is a cascading effect to that.
Right. But the cascade cannot start without an initial waterfall.
Okay. I'll give you that.
And your initial waterfall took 4 or 5 years to flow.
Right.
Mine took 19.
Right.
And that's a credit to you.
Yeah.
And some people work their entire career, the spigot never gets turned on.
Sure. I also think it's a picture of our world, we're not the biggest of academia worlds, and like if you go to psychonomic versus society, versus you go to annual conference on teaching, there's a law of numbers there too.
I want to, while we're here in this neighborhood, acknowledge that we both have the privilege of
100%.
Whiteness and maleness
100%
on our side, and there's a great deal of privilege there. And there are also other white males who have that privilege but didn't have the success that either one of us has had. So it's a complicated picture.
Sure.
I don't want to discount the privilege. It has certainly helped, but it's only part of the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I've thoroughly embarrassed you. You're flush red. We're going to get you some medical attention here soon. I don't think you and Garth talked about this in part 1. So now that we're in part 2, you talked a little bit about family. I know you talked about your work background in the first episode, first interview. Were you always going to go to college?
No, not at all.
Because you left home and you were a rancher. You did a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah. I think at one point in time, I switched my undergrad majors numerous times, but I didn't go to college right away even. I went to a trade school. And I did talk about this in the first one, where I went to learn to be a farrier, which is just a fancy name for shoeing horses, not shooting, but shoeing horses, putting shoes on horses, and kind of podiatry for horses. And then I ended up going to community college, and then transferred from a community college in California to Montana to a 4-year small state school. And I think my goal was to be a high school science teacher and agriculture teacher, so like an ag teacher.
And your parents had to have gone to college because your father was a lawyer,
and then retired as a judge. Yeah,
retired as a judge, and your mom was.
She worked for the state corrections, and she was an office manager, essentially an analyst.
Had she gone to college?
A little bit of community college, but never finished. And
so they didn't push you to go at first because you didn't go at first.
No, they were really smart not to push me to go at first. And I tell my student this, so I'm not ashamed to tell it to whoever listens to the podcast. I had to go to night school to get out of high school. I flunked a lot. I wasn't a very good student. And so they're kind of, if they push me to do anything, it was, you need a trade at the very least. You need some type of career.
It's smart advice.
Yeah.
All right. So,
I was hoping you were going to skip over that part.
I can if you want me to.
Yeah, no.
I will be respectful.
No, not at all. I'm joking.
So, what was it really? Was it that you weren't a good student, or you chose to not do the work? I have a hard time believing that you weren't smart enough.
No, it was kind of like, so I will say this, I'll admit to this too. I essentially flunked out of college as well and was sent on academic probation for a year. And I tell my psych, when I used to be a psych advisor, and I would tell them that I didn't qualify for psych until I became an advisor, and then I became a member for life, of course. But kind of the same situation for my undergrad, early in my undergrad and my high school career was, I just had other interests and they weren't academic.
So it's not that you couldn't do the work. Mm-hmm. It's not that you weren't smart enough to do the work. It's just that you weren't completing the work.
No, not at all.
It's almost like someone needed to teach a 500,000 point course to get your attention, as opposed to a 50-point course where each assignment was worth 5/10 of the grade.
I mean, there were certain courses that in high school and in college that I absolutely adored and loved. And
did you earn A's or B's in those courses in high
sure.
school and college?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So it's interesting. So you could do the work when you chose to.
Yeah. It just goes back to teaching, right? So it goes back to those people and subjects. It's not just about the teacher.
It's about motivation too.
Well, no, motivation. That it is. Yeah. It's about student motivation in the sense of, but I was attracted to certain teachers and certain content, of course, but really it was about whether I felt like I was connected, or even to a certain degree, whether they were connected to me in what way. And I think those teachers, and it's something that I still try to do. And, I talk about it a lot, whether it's in my writing or research or podcast or whatever, or talks, that, whether it's rapport or whether it's learning alliance, what you want to call it, whether it's nonverbal immediacy, whatever the term and construct you want to put it, I think those are the things that when I was in high school I could do and I had motivation to do. But if it wasn't there, it was bye-bye scenario.
So can you recall a class in high school that you failed?
Oh, which one?
just one. I'm not trying to embarrass you.
English, definitely English. I had a person who I will not name names was not somebody who I connected with and not something I was interested in.
So the person really just you clashed with.
Yeah, and when I talk, so some of my students, almost the vast majority of my students are going to be future teachers. They're going to be elementary ed teachers or early childhood ed. And when we talk about reading development and stuff like that, I always advise them. I said, it's not about what they're reading. It's about whether they're motivated to read it.
Right.
And so, if they want to read a graphic novel, more power to them. If they want to read a manual for how to rebuild a lawnmower engine, go for it. If they want to read comics, I don't care. Get them reading. And this teacher was very, very siloed in her thinking about what I should be doing and how I should learn.
What was a topic in high school that you did really well in, that you aced all the time? Or
all my animal science courses, which were biology courses, but they were couched in agriculture, and so
there was an ag teacher. Was it taught by one person typically?
Yeah. And then architecture, I took drafting and loved drafting. I loved geometry, but hated algebra.
Either the art teacher, the ag teacher, or the architecture teacher. Would you mind sharing their name?
Yeah, one is Mr. Halford. That was my ag teacher. Okay. And the other one was Mr. Schlinkman.
Let's go with Schlinkman.
Yeah.
If Mr. Schlinkman had taught English, how do you think you would have done in English?
I definitely would have been more motivated, and I think I would have done fine. I don't know if I struggled in that for a while. That was the subject that I struggled with the most, but I definitely would have been turning stuff in. I mean, literally what I would do is I would, in my nephew, I won't name which one.
Who knows who he is?
I had the same issue where it just didn't turn stuff in, wasn't wasn't a capability issue. It wasn't an ability issue.
But with Mr. Schlinkford, you would have never not turned something in.
Never, no.
It was an alliance to him.
Yeah.
Or Mr.
Halford.
You would have never, because you don't want to let them down.
No.
Because you loved the content, but you adored the teacher.
Sure. And it's, I don't think that students need to necessarily adore their teachers. I think that students need to feel like they're respected by their teachers. And there are going to be circumstances in which teachers can't connect with their students for whatever, maybe a cultural reason, for whatever reason. But as long as they convey a message or communicate to their students that they're there for them, regardless of whether they have that experience or not, because often they don't, that is 100% genuine.
How many subjects in high school kept you from graduating from high school?
Like to go to night school and summer school?
Yeah. Was it just the English?
No, I had a history course that I
just ballpark it.
I think it was 3 or 4 classes I needed to take to get out of high school.
Were they all taught by the same person?
No, because in high school, like a history course, but 2 of them were taught by the same person, and 2 of them were taught by separate other folks.
So 3 kind of. One way to say it would be 3 teachers overall were hindering, from your perspective, hindering your success.
Right. Yeah. In another person who taught English language arts, when I graduated from high school, I got, ironically, even though I had really bad grades, I got a few scholarships for agriculture. So, because you can use that money to go to a trade school too. It was my community. It didn't matter. You didn't have to go to a 4-year school or a 2-year school. And in most high schools, especially of ones of my size, which was really small, you have an award ceremony and they call the people like, I'll get the scholarships. And so everybody who's being called up is quite great students. They're really good students and some of my dearest friends. And then my name was called up for a couple times. And I had that one of my teachers who I did not pass and had to take at night basically said, well, where are you going to school? And I said, well, I might go to this trade school. But if I decide to go on, one of the places I'm thinking, and I live close to this, was University of California, Davis, which I had thought I'd be a vet school. It has the vet school for California. It's this nationally known vet school. And he just looked at me and he laughed and he goes, you'll never get into UC Davis. And I think that epitomizes the opposite of what attracts me as a teacher and how my philosophy of teaching, regardless of whether I felt that way, which I would never feel that way about anybody. But if I felt that way about a student of mine, I would never say that to them.
Wait, you say good luck.
Yes.
Or you just don't say anything to that student.
No, you say,
good to see you.
Right. Yeah.
Take care.
So you're right. There's definitely a commonality there with some of the instructors. College was a little bit different. I think college wasn't always about the instructor. I think it was just more about what my priorities were.
Have you gone back to your high school and seen your high school instructors and introduced them to Dr. Richmond?
Well, there are a lot of people. Where I grew up in California is still very rural and very unpopulated. And very few people are convinced that I have a PhD. They don't. Yeah.
Are these they're deniers?
Or they're very, very shocked. One of the two. I haven't since actually, Mr. Halford came to a party for me when I got my PhD, actually. My high school teacher did. Okay. And so I've seen him, who doesn't teach high school anymore, which is a shame.
What about the 3 teachers who would be...
No, one's not here anymore. And
has passed away.
The other one got fired from their job. And if you can't tell, I'm smiling at the moment. And then I don't know about the 3rd.
Yeah.
Yes, it's kind of interesting, huh?
It's very interesting. I think even though I don't think you see it this way, I think there's the story of work ethic and perseverance, because it could have been really easy, Aaron, for you by these, and I'm going to call them prickish, by these prickish high school teachers to sour you, and you drop out of high school and you be done with education.
Sure.
You could have been done.
Yeah.
And walked away and gone and done trade school and gotten, done, apprenticeship and, and been, and done a trade and been very successful and
absolutely
had a lucrative career and never gone to college and had a great life. But but you have this work ethic built in that you don't give up, and you went to night school to finish, even though you got your teeth knocked in by some prickish teachers who had no business doing that really as a professional.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet you persevered, and then went to college and did a lot of good things, but it sounds like you kind of got distracted.
Oh, yeah, I did.
In college, which is kind of typical for college-age students.
Well,
right?
And I think, too, I was a little ill-prepared, and I think that in the sense that because my high school experience...
Well, rural students are often unprepared.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what the literature tells us.
Oh, absolutely. And I had the metacognition and the awareness enough to pick a small liberal arts state university that was literally maybe twice as big, maybe 3 times as big as my high school. And so I knew I could, if I was going to do it anywhere, it was probably going to be at University of Montana Western. And it was interesting because you talk about these early experiences that kind of transform the way you approach things. And I think early on, I had some inspiration, but I also had the catalyst of motivation that, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong, or I'm not going to do that. But I think in college, it didn't flip or reverse. What it became then, you have models, exemplars of what it means to be, regardless of whether it's a 2-year high school or 4-year or graduate school type teacher, what that means. Yeah.
I think you're describing something really complex. The motivation changed.
It did. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think at age 12, the motivation was family, internal motivation. Mm-hmm. This is a hard-working family. We all work hard. Get your ass off the couch. Mm-hmm. You're going to start working. In high school, it was different. It was I'm willing to work hard for people who can encourage me, but I can get my teeth knocked in by people who are jerks. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it's, okay, I can persevere when I see amazing role models.
Well, yeah.
I may not do it immediately, but I'll do it eventually.
Yeah, and I think, too, in college it's a little bit different. And in everybody's high school and university or college experiences are very, for me, high school it's small, and so everybody knew you. And college was somewhat like that, but you're also still just there's some anonymity in college at university. And so I think instead of you don't have the motivation of somebody says you can't do something, but you might have the motivation of you find someone who believes you can do something. And so it flips in that table. And so when you have a couple teachers, like I mentioned previously, Mark Crank and some other teachers who believe in you, I think that it's still motivation, but now it's more to this, here's this positive outcome, here's this positive light that you can work from, for sure.
Plus, those college teachers don't have the baggage of a high school town, high school teachers, high school everything, families in a small town, rural town.
Yeah.
All that baggage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, and I think it's still, I don't think that will ever go away. I mean, my father's been retired for 10 years now, and he still teaches at community college, and he teaches at a judge's college and still works a lot. And I think that's just the norm.
I don't think it's I think it's baked into your DNA. I think someone's going to tell you to retire someday, and you're going to be the busiest retiree that North America has ever seen.
Right. Well, we'll see. We'll see when that day comes. Maybe it'll be a switch. I don't know.
Really?
Will it be a switch for you?
I don't want to retire.
So that's denial, right? So it's just, I'm not going to do it.
You and I have both seen colleagues around the country, retire in air quotes, and they're doing as much work for free than they were when they were employed. I might as well keep my health insurance and a paycheck as long as I'm enjoying it for the most part.
Yeah.
And have what I have. And I have things I would do. I would do more woodworking.
Sure.
If I was, but do I want to do that 40 hours a week?
Yeah.
52 weeks?
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not, because I'm just a dabbler.
Yeah.
I don't want to make money on it.
I wanted to ask you this previously when you asked kind of early on in the interview, how are you doing through this process? And really, I want to flip it back on you. Like, how did you fare through the last 12 to 18 months?
You know what? Listen to episode number 121.
Do you talk about it?
Yeah. So when Garth was here about a month, when he was here in November of 2019, and we had a little bit of an afternoon to kill, and actually it was in my office then, I said, hey, Garth, let me interview you. And I just sandbagged him. And he didn't know it was coming. I kind of didn't know it was coming either. I didn't know we were going to have that much time. And we sat down, set up these microphones, and we talked for about an hour and 15 minutes. And he said to me then, you're going to have to let me interview you. I said, yeah, sure. I figured I was going to die or something. I just never have to do it. Well, about a month ago, turnabout was fair play.
Okay. I will listen to it. You answered the question.
I'm not dodging it, but it's long and complex. Yeah. And I talk about my, pulmonary embolism. I talk about my hospital stuff.
I'm at like 103-ish right now. And so I've got them in my queue. Okay.
That's really cute because you're letting your anal retentiveness control your listening order. All our listeners out there, it's okay to listen out of order. It's okay.
I don't know. It's like skipping to season 4 of Stranger Things. Like, how do you do that?
Well, some serials are meant to be watched in order.
This isn't one of those?
These are not.
Okay.
These are, even though we do organize by seasons, they're typically not connected.
I know they're not, but I still like to see the progression of skills and
we have gotten better in our interviewing from season 1 to season 5.
I gotcha.
This is true. But I first off, thank you for asking. Yeah. I do talk about that at great length. In fact, that episode is the longest single episode we've ever released. I think it's about an hour and 40 minutes. We've never released an episode.
All right. That might go into the queue on the drive back from Boise to Boulder, Colorado. Because I got 12 hours.
I'm trying to think, is that family friendly? I think it, first off,
I've got headphones.
There's no curse words.
My kids are doing their own electronics.
Yeah,
on a 12-hour
I don't think you're supposed to listen to headphones while you're driving.
Oh, I'm not. But we share driving. I could do if I'm not working and on the car ride.
And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. If I'm not working on the car drive home.
I was working a little bit on the way over here.
Of course you were. I hope you've got that book revision done on the car drive here and the 3 manuscripts you're revising and resubmitting. In the next couple keynotes worked out. It's
a compulsion.
It's a compulsion that I think that has ultimately served you well, as long as you think it's served you well.
It has. No, it has. 100%. No, it's just who I am. It's like you said, DNA.
I think Regan Goering has the same compulsion, and Jane Hallinan has the same compulsion, and Stephen Chu has the same compulsion.
There's a long list of those people.
And I think Susan Nolan has the same compulsion, and very many of our colleagues.
Yeah, and you.
Highly productive. I think I have it when I'm not serving as department chair.
Yeah, that's a different deal.
The compulsion changes. So I think I had it. I think I'll have it again. I don't feel like I have it now.
Yeah,
to be honest.
So. Well, it's just switched, right? It's your time is.
It's switched to a different things are on fire now. Yeah. Different things get my attention that are somewhat out of my control.
I think we talked about this at Rocky Mountain Psych Association and kind of the mentoring program is. One of the things I talk about is there's only one pie. It's not like you get to make more pies. It's not like there's no perfect balance. It's kind of perfect imbalance of what you make it. And so you've probably have just switched your efforts and energy to some other task.
The problem is, though, there are a couple of aliens among us that have a pie and a half.
I know. They
have one appointment that's 0.75, and they actually have another appointment that's 0.75, and they do them both really well, and it pisses me off. I gotta tell you, I'm way more petty about it than I should be.
But it's all relative though, because I do a lot of hiking if I can get out, and I've climbed a lot of 14ers in Colorado, and there's just like in the wilderness and outdoors, there's always somebody who is better and more efficient than you. And there's always somebody who you may be better and more efficient of you. So it's this kind of spectrum of stuff. I think where it goes awry is when it's unhealthy, and I think also one of the things we've talked about in the past is that if you're searching or you're striving for this perfect balance of things, I think you're setting yourself up, and it's kind of a long fall.
Yeah, I really enjoy the outdoors. I look at it on my webcam all the time. Idaho's got some beautiful webcams set up, and I really enjoy the outdoors. I don't know what a 14er is, and I think I'm going to just avoid going there.
It's probably a good idea.
Aaron, I've kept you for well over an hour. I certainly appreciate your time. It was probably a little bit more serious than you were expecting, but
yeah,
I'm not the Garth, hey, we're going fishing tomorrow, let's do a podcast and take our shirts off at the end type of guy. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
I appreciate it too. And what the listeners may not know is we have been sitting and talking to each other for 5 hours, 6 hours.
Yeah, we're you got here a little after 10, and it's coming up on 5 o'clock for almost 7 hours.
And I think that of all the things we've been talking about today, I think that one of the things we all look forward to is personally connecting with the people we are close to, who mean something to us. And so, A, thank you for having me on here. And B, I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity just to do something like this in person and to actually see our friends and colleagues. And I hope many, many other people will have that opportunity.
Yeah, whether it's at a conference or you're traveling or you're passing through, or it's at a convention or a program review, or it's at a celebration of something for someone.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.